Welcome, everybody, to the SoxProspects.com podcast. We are the web's #1 source for information on the Boston Red Sox from top to bottom, from Fort Myers to Worcester, across the Pike to Fenway, and all stops in between. Thank you all for listening. My name is Chris Hatfield, and I am the executive editor of Sox Prospects, joined as always by our director of scouting, Ian Kundle. Ian, to open the show this week, I am curious, how in your household do you celebrate minor league opening day?
Well, it's weird this year.
It's anticlimactic this year. Because
it's
always been
already started, but it's already started. Yeah.
But this is minor league opening day to me.
Yeah, all
the rest of the affiliates are playing in theory.
Yeah, all the full season affiliates are playing.
Right.
So yeah,
fair. How in your family and your culture do you celebrate minor league opening day? What traditions? What mores? What archaeologists or other sociologists studying the Kundle family? What traditions do you have for minor league opening day? Is there?
I will be watching MiLB TV, and now via MLB TV on my TV, which is fantastic. It was a great adjustment this season. So I will be doing that and probably texting people at some of the games. That's probably it.
You know what's funny is I actually need to get a refund for my MiLB TV because that automatically renewed, and then I got my MLB TV and didn't realize that it was going to be in there. So I don't need to pay for MiLB TV, which is a little annoying. So anyway, that's too much information. But thank you all for listening. We appreciate it. This episode, it's minor league opening day. We're going to talk season opening rosters. We're going to talk about some news from the opening of the Major League season as well. Ian went to Worcester for opening day. He's going to have a report from Worcester. And of course, if you support us on patreon.com/SoxProspects, you get access to the Patreon game updates, including Ian's check-in from Worcester opening day. That's, if it's not up by the time you listen to this, it will be very soon. You also get access to things like behind the scenes rankings stuff. We just did our season opening rankings. We're not going to talk about that on this episode just because there's a lot to talk about. We have opening day type stuff to talk about on this episode. We also recorded a very special episode the same sitting. That's going to be our next episode. It's a conversation with Red Sox farm director, aka director of player development, Brian Abraham. That is going to be our next episode. So that's coming up beginning of next week if you're listening to this shortly after we release it. So we're very excited. We've got a lot of content for you. There's a lot to do. If you like what we're doing, you can support the show in a few ways. One, you can rate and review us on iTunes, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, wherever it is that you listen to the show. You can tell a friend, tell a neighbor, tell the other person in your family with whom you celebrate minor league opening day. You can talk to them about it. And of course, you can support us on patreon.com/SoxProspect. And you can send us your emails at podcast@SoxProspects.com because we want to talk about what you all want to hear about. Okay, I guess we might as well start, Ian, with the latest news since our last episode. And that, of course, is that the Major League season and the AAA season have started. We talked last episode about really the final spots in the Major League roster and how those had shaken out. The Red Sox have played 6 games. The Worcester Red Sox have only played 3 because they got rained out consecutive days. Or not rained out, they got field conditioned out for 2 days in Buffalo, this is kind of crazy. I don't know if people saw this, but the Buffalo Bisons had awful weather and their tarp got split in 2 during the storm.
Oh, wow.
Oh, you didn't see this? Yeah.
No, I thought it was going to be I saw an affiliate, and it honestly might have been a college team, had their tarp eaten by rats, and they didn't realize until they put it out on the field.
Oh my God.
I'm pretty sure it was a college team, but
yeah, probably. That's crazy.
But yeah, that's not ideal. Northeast baseball in March or early April is rough. Then again, it's going to be like 70 in the next couple of days here. That's
true. You're going to get what we had today, but
yeah, it was not that here today. It was like 35 degrees or 38 degrees here today.
Yeah. But anyway, so the Bisons, their tarp got torn in 2 and they did not have a backup tarp. So they had to borrow the Syracuse club's backup tarp. But by the time they got it, the field was a goner. So they did not play Tuesday. They did not play Wednesday. And the Red Sox looked great because they were going to send James Paxton and Brian Bayo to Worcester to rehab, but instead they had them rehabbing in Florida, which turned out to be the right move because there were no games in Buffalo. So good call by the Red Sox there. Meanwhile, the Red Sox started, they are 2-4, Ian. Can't put it together with the hitting and pitching in the same game is basically where we're at with the Red Sox right now.
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting too, because like after opening night, the bullpen was kind of, everyone was like very concerned about the
Ready to
bullpen.
bury the bullpen.
The bullpen's kind of been fine since then.
It's been great. Yeah, I think it's been
the starting pitching up until the last 2 games was an issue, but then they figured out the starting pitching, and then the offense, which carried them the first 3 games, has basically been non-existent this series, or was non-existent this series. So
since the first inning of the first game of the
yeah,
virus series,
I think it's going to be an up and down start. I think that it's hard, and it's hard to judge them right now until we see the majority of the team back, till they get Bayo and Whitlock back, till we see, Crawford and how probably you're moving into the bullpen and kind of beefing that area up. Until that's kind of set, it's tough to get a read on them. But I mean, it's gonna be a battle all year. Every night's gonna be competitive. And in the AL East, it's going to be tough sledding. I mean, there's good teams in there, and so all you got to hope is just you can kind of weather the storm early, don't dig yourself too deep a hole, and just be able to play baseball by August that still matters, so that you can reinforce at the trade deadline. Maybe a couple guys in the farm get ready to come up and make an impact. And yeah, it's going to be every game is going to be tough this season. I think that some of the new guys that have made some pretty big impressions. I think Adam Duvall especially has looked really good. But yeah, I mean, then the bats, though, the last couple of days have done nothing. So it's like, I think they're still trying to find that consistency. And I think it doesn't help that the ball was flying in Fenway, which never happens at this time of year, which is very strange. And B, that the weather, like today's game, it was like 40 degrees and windy. Like that's not fun to play baseball in that. So
no.
We'll see it. You get to go to Detroit now, where I'm sure the weather's going to be great this weekend. I have no idea what it's going to look like, but I'm guessing it's not going to be great. But
right.
Yeah, it's baseball, as we said, baseball in the Northeast and in the Midwest in early season is always an adventure. So we'll see.
That it is. I mean, other guys who kind of stood out early. I mean, Masataka Yoshida looks solid at the plate.
I mean,
the first few games he did. He's been
he had a rough series. He had a rough series, and I think the one thing that's really just interesting to me is he's just hitting a ton of infield ground balls, and he's not striking out, which is kind of what we expected. But it's just interesting to me that, like the number of ground outs he's had this season just seems really, really high. So we'll kind of see if he can kind of, start getting the ball in the air a little more, making more line drive contact. But yeah, he's had some good moments. I think pretty much all the new guys they brought over have had some moments. And yeah, it's just going to be interesting to see what happens as they get, more reps and as the season goes on.
Yep. I think that's probably about it in the majors. In AAA, I guess we can talk a little bit about. Well, we could talk about AAA. Where we're going to talk about the season opening rosters as well, obviously. So I think we can hold off on that piece of things. I guess just as far as other news of note, since our last episode, there were a few more cuts from minor league camp, 4 to be precise. And the one that stood out the most, Ian, was outfielder Eduardo Vaughn, native of Panama. Really a guy who kind of had our eye probably coming out of maybe fall instructs 2 years ago. Does that sound right? In 2021? When was he kind of I think he was at his peak kind of that summer.
Did a really good, I think I want to say instructs, and then
instructs in 21, I think, and then we saw him in camp last year, and then last year he came out of camp, went to Salem, and just bombed and got demoted back down to the FCL.
Yeah, it was kind of like after the FCL season in 21, and then instructs.
But he just kind of never really bounced back from that. He was released along with infielder Alex Zapete, who didn't make it out of the complex, corner infielder. Relief pitcher Henry Nunez Rijo, who actually had a pretty good year last year in the FCL, but old for the level. So again, when we were talking about AHL at a level, just how important that is. Just he never made it out of the complex either. And then catcher Nays Belmarcano was also released the following day from a pretty large group of catchers that they've got pegged for. There's like 4 catchers on the roster in Salem, which is kind of wild. One of whom is going to be playing some first base, and one of whom is on the development list to start the year. So, but Nays Belmarcano also caught, again, mostly guys from the complex level at that point, basically. So, and Any other news, Ian? I guess Garrett Whitlock rehabbing in Worcester, Bayo and Paxton are rehabbing. It sounds like Whitlock reportedly is going to be activated on the 11th. He is pitching Portland's opener. So I'm trying to think if anyone has pitched opening days for multiple teams, because usually the minor league opening days are not staggered like they are this year.
Yeah, usually.
I can't ever remember that happening, obviously, for that reason.
Yeah, I mean, at least that's interesting to see if. Well, he's pitching Portland, right? Thursday.
Yeah, he's pitching in Portland Thursday after pitching Worcester's opener as well.
Well, we'll see how the game. I don't know if they're going to play tomorrow. It's supposed to rain from right now in Portland from 4 p.m. to 7 p.m. So they probably will play, but it might be a little bit of delayed start for opening day. Sure. But it's also going to be in the mid 40s, so not ideal pitching conditions. But you make do with what you can do.
That you do. Bayo, it seems like, will be shortly behind him. Whitlock's going to be activated on the 11th. I think
Bayo pitched today.
He threw 5 innings.
Fort Myers. Threw 73 pitches, I think, or something.
Yep, 72 or 73.
So he's probably 2 starts behind Bayo, or behind Whitlock. So he'll make, I would guess, 2 starts with an affiliate.
Maybe. I mean, if he's already at 5 innings, like that's we'll see. We'll see how the next start goes. I mean, he definitely needs at least one more, and we'll see where they go from there. They certainly could use him in Boston right now. Given the state of starting pitching, Paxton probably is more end of month, best case scenario, it looks like. But they're getting guys back, and that will be good. So we'll see how they got, like you said, they've got the Tigers next. We'll see where they go from there on the season opening stretch. Let's jump down to minor league rosters and Worcester, which you actually got to go to Worcester open. Did you just go to opening day, the one game?
Yeah, I was at opening day. No, I was at opening day.
Okay. Worcester roster, we found out last week. It's a lot of people are really happy with that roster. I think I was a little surprised at how everyone was saying how good the roster was, because I think it's a good AAA roster. Certainly a lot of names people know and things like that. And it's decently good in terms of prospectiness, which is a technical term. On the offensive side of the ball, highest ranked prospect would be Emmanuel Valdez at second base, but you've got guys there like David Hamilton. Jaron Duran is obviously a post prospect. Wilyer Abreu, the outfielder, starts on the IL. I don't think he'll need much longer because he was playing by the time we left camp, but it seems like more of a getting him reps thing that they're doing down there. I'm trying to think, other names. There's some major league depth guys like Greg Allen, Nico Goodrum, Jorge Alfaro, of course, Bobby Dahlbeck there as well, another post prospect. So an interesting roster. On the pitching side, we mentioned Whitlock, and there's that AAA rotation that includes Brandon Walter, Brian Mata, Chris Murphy. Victor Santos starts the year on the IL, so you've got guys like Norbert Godinho and Matt Dermody in the rotation. Pretty good bullpen with guys like AJ Politi was returned. Did we talk about that last episode? I don't remember if we did. We may not have. So AJ Politi is back at any rate. I don't think there's too much more to say about it than that. Adonier Mosqueda, let's see, Chase Shugart, Durbin Feltman. You can see the rosters on SoxProspects.com. Anything that stand out to you about that AAA roster, Ian? No real surprises, I don't think. So if you don't have any, I guess we can jump right into.
No, I think the surprises are who's not there. I think 2 stand out: Sedan Raphael and Christian Koss. And I think Koss just caught in a numbers game. They want to give Bobby Dahlbeck shortstop reps. They want Hamilton playing there because he's on the 40. And so I think he just got caught in a numbers game. They want him playing every day. I like Christian Koss. I think he could be a very serviceable big leaguer. So I think it makes sense to have him start in Double A if he's going to be able to play there every day. And I think we kind of touch on that a little bit in the interview with Brian that you'll hear in the next episode. But I think based on what we saw in spring training, just kind of the area of his game that he needs to work on, I think it will be better suited at the Double A level than the AAA level at this point.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, it's an interesting group.
Let's talk about opening day.
I was able to get out to opening day in Worcester. It was cold, but it was a little wet, but they brought out brutal. Yeah, it was not fun, but the stars were out. Bob Cousy did his annual appearance for his very long play ball introduction, which is maybe my favorite part of the Worcester, because I've been to the last 3 opening, or I guess the only 3 opening days.
Yeah, the last 3 Worcester opening days,
which is the only 3. But it was fun to see Bob Cousy again. David Ortiz made an appearance. There were a lot of other Oil Can Boyd and several other ex-Red Sox players were there. So it was a fun atmosphere on opening day, and it was a good crowd given the conditions, I would say. And I think it was fun to see Garrett Whitlock. He, we don't always get to see major leaguers rehabbing, so it was interesting seeing him versus a pretty loaded Mets lineup.
Yeah, that
And
Mets lineup looks good.
This is the funniest part is it's probably a better lineup than Oakland's. Like,
could be.
It's really close.
I mean, it's so we've got Brett Baty.
So it has three of the top. It has the Mets' 4 top hitting prospects, who are all like on some top 100 lists, including 2 who were in the top 20 or 30. So Brett Baty, Francisco Alvarez, Mark Vientos, Ronnie Mauricio. Then it has 3 ex-big leaguers in Danny Mendick, Jonathan Aruz, old friend, and Khalil Lee. And then it had old friend Lorenzo Cedrola starting in center field, who you may or may not remember. Do you remember what trade he was in, is the question. Do you remember what he was traded for? Because I do, obviously. But
because you looked it up.
No, I actually didn't look it up. I do know. You should know this because
it's Twins, right?
No.
It's not Twins. Reds?
It also is a trick question. Yes, because he wasn't traded for a player.
Was he international bonus money?
Yep.
Yeah, okay.
That's why I remembered it, because
Okay.
It was Cincinnati for $1.5 million international bonus money. I believe he was traded with Nick Longy, I want to say.
Was he? I was gonna say when it was Reds and international bonus money, I was wondering if he was the Longy deal.
I believe it was with Nick Longy.
I don't think it was, though. Because Longy was the year that they signed Daniel Flores, because it was basically they traded Longy for Flores. And I thought Cedrola was after that, but maybe he wasn't. At any rate.
He was traded in July 17 for international bonus money. Oh, no, it was a year later. You're right. Cedrola was traded July 18, so I guess it was a year later. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah.
But it was it just happened to be the same team.
Same team. Right. Well, if you've got a team like that that's not using all of its money every year.
Fair. So yeah, so that it was a good lineup, though, is the moral story. And it's a good test for Whitlock. And I thought he came out really strong. He was like 93 to 95, which is pretty in line with what he was last season. Maybe a tick down. I guess his year average last year was 95.3 with a sinker or fastball, but it was good. His fastball was good at start, and it was pretty good for the first couple innings. Then it, as he got into his fourth inning, he seemed to start to wear down a little bit. But his last inning of work, he was 91, 92, 90 to 92. So that's a little concerning that his velocity fell off so quickly, and his command kind of fell off with that velocity. But I thought his changeup looked really good. He got 5 whiffs with his changeup on 12 swings, which is a really good. And that's a nice, nice whiff rate right there.
That.
42%, can't complain. I put a plus on it, 83 to 85. It's a good pitch. It's a very good pitch. That was his best pitch to me. It was his most consistent throughout. He could throw whenever he wanted, righties, lefties. So that was a really encouraging pitch. Breaking ball, I'm not a huge fan. It's kind of morphing more into a sweeper than a slider.
Interesting.
It's slow. It was 77 to 81, which last year he averaged 83. So we're talking about a pretty steep drop in velo there.
Right.
And he did not have really good feel for it. He only threw it 10 times compared to 13% of the time compared to his changeup, which he threw 35% of the time. So it was clear third pitch, but he really struggled to land it for strikes. I think it was only called a strike 2 or 3 times the entire game. So, 20% of the time, not very good. But yeah, it was okay at times, but I don't know. I wasn't a huge fan of it. And I guess that kind of just it carries over from what I heard from scouts who saw him in spring training, that they weren't enamored with his breaking ball now. They seem to have preferred that power slider he had last year, or even frankly 2 years ago, than to what he's showing now. But I guess we'll have to see kind of what it looks like in game action.
Yeah.
Because as I said, it's a pretty steep drop off from what it was last year. I mean, even last year when it was down from the year before, it was averaging 83.2. So we'll have to see that. But it was one of those things where if they brought him up in a bullpen role or a multi-inning role, I don't think he'll have any issues for 2 to 3 inning stints. I'm just slightly worried what's going to happen when he gets innings 4, 5, 6, etc. if he's starting. but he's got to build up somewhere. So I guess if you think you can get 4 good innings out of him, it might as well just do it at the major league level and kind of do that for a couple starts and then go from there.
Mm-hmm.
After
it seems like he's going to start. The report is he's going to start an opening day in Portland and then get called up.
Yeah, it seems like Tampa on like the 12th is when
the 11th
or 11th. Okay.
Yep.
But yeah, like I have a feeling if he does come up for that, he's going to be on like a pitch count of that will not let him get past like 4 or 5 innings. Because yeah, I do still think he needs to be built up if his stuff was kind of dropping off as quickly as it did. After him was Jake Fourier. He was obviously a minor league free agent signing this year. He was fastball. I called it a cutter. Maybe it's a slider. And then he was mainly those 2 pitches. I think through 1 changeup or splitter at 83. He was fine. Like it's hard to judge guys this early in the season because of how cold it is and like opening day, like just weird stuff happens. After him was Joe Jocks, who's that was actually my first time seeing him, and he's pretty funky.
I think it's
Jake's, yeah. And he throws from like that low arm slot, kind of side arms the ball, 88 to 90, like sinking fastball, changeup curveball. I guess the highlight too, I'll just kind of jump ahead. Chase Ugart, Ryan Sheriff also threw, and then the returning AJ Politi got into the game.
Yeah. What'd you think of him?
He was fine. I mean, he's mostly threw cutters. He only threw a few 4-seamers. It was mostly cutters. Had a couple curveballs too. Just
I guess he's going to close for them, apparently.
Which makes sense. I mean, it's not as good a bullpen as last season,
right?
But yeah, I mean, it's fine. I kind of like when I think of Politi, I think of him as like a good depth arm. He's someone that if they needed, like if injuries happen and you want someone to call up, you call him up, but you don't feel bad about DFAing him if you have to. So yeah, I think it's a solid depth arm that I'm glad to have back in the system, but not much beyond that. Moving over to the position players, I would say the only real standout was David Hamilton. Shocker. I mean, dude loves opening day.
He does love opening day. This is true.
The context of that is last year in Portland, he had, I think, 2 home runs and a double and 7 ribbies on opening day.
His opening day was so good that he was like
carried his stats for
he was
months.
Not good for 2 months, and his numbers still looked good just because of how he was went like off in that
5 for 5 or 4 for 5 with 2 homers, a double, and like 7 RBIs. Yeah. So he was 3 for 5 with a home run. I think the most encouraging thing to me is he actually had 2 batted balls that were harder than his like anything he had last season. Or like they were 2 of his like 5. I got the numbers. He's like 2 of his 5 hardest hit balls in his career were in that game. Okay. So that was kind of encouraging because last season, one of the biggest issues was his exit velo numbers were not good. They were below average for a minor leaguer, let alone a major leaguer. So that was encouraging to see him. Like his home run was, I think, like 103, and he had a ground ball that was like 109 or 108. So that's for him, that's that's hitting the ball hard. Other than that, it was not a lot. Like they scored 11 runs, but there were a decent number of walks, and there weren't like Daniel Palka homered, Greg Allen homered. Like it was a lot of like, it's a very veteran laden team. It's weird. It's actually a weird team in the sense that I think every single player in the opening day lineup, except for Hamilton and Valdez and Fitzgerald, I guess, had MLB experience. So you had 6 ex-major leaguers and then 3 guys in our top 60, or maybe Fitzgerald's just outside the top 60. But yeah, no. So it's a solid team, and I think it's more of, there's more potential depth options, I think, than in past seasons, which is interesting because pretty much everyone you're going to see is either on the 40-man or has played in the majors. So having that mix, having that mix of players. I mean, obviously there's a few exceptions like Nick Sogard, Fitzgerald, but yeah, it's an interesting group, and I think I see what the Red Sox are doing. They're trying to build that depth that if they have injuries or they have issues during the season, they have guys prepared to come up and help out at the major league level who either have experience or have played their way, to their first call up by their performance.
And I think it gives good context to Rafaela not making the team, because I don't think they saw him yet necessarily, although, in an interview with Brian Abraham that'll run in the next episode, he does talk about, look, he wouldn't be the first guy to get called up from AA, but like, I think he would be a guy that they would be less inclined to call up. I've seen a fair amount of Rafaela is in AA because Jarren Duran is in AAA. I do not think that's true. Personally, maybe it's the case. I don't think that's correct. I think
no, I don't think his bat was ready for AAA.
I don't think he was his, but yeah. And look, they didn't necessarily assume that Tapia was going to opt out when they signed him to a deal with an opt out for camp. He had 2 more opt outs. Like, it was not a given that Tapia was going to opt out. Once he had the camp he did, I think it became one.
Yeah.
But
and it's still like his usage is so weird. Like he made his first start of the season. He has like 5
today,
at bats. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's, but but I think the thing is, it's like, that's why you're okay with having Tapia fill that role. He's still Raymel Tapia. Like,
yeah. I don't know. I just wish, I would say my one, going back to the Red Sox a little bit, my one critique would be I wish they had a speed option off the bench because they're pinch running way more than I remember them doing in the past.
I can tell you right now.
But it's Rob Ref Snyder or Yu Chang who's pinch running. And it's like, I really wish they had someone with actuals who's like a plus to better runner to put out there.
Yeah, I mean the first game, Connor Wong, pinch hit. Sorry, they used Ref Snyder as a pinch runner in games 1 and 2, and they used Yu Chang as a pinch runner in the 4th game.
Yeah, and they're also like platooning a decent amount, which is interesting too. Like they're pinch hitting like McGuire or Wong later in games if it's a righty or lefty. They're pinch hitting Chang. They're pinch hitting. I guess
they've
Tapia
used
has
at least 2 people off the bench in every game so far.
Right.
And part of that might just be it's early in the year. That's
right.
something they do, and it's cold.
But
so that's
I think
not
the
that's
the
not
pinch
weird.
the pinch running part though. I don't remember them.
I can't remember them using pinch runners season. Like this. No.
So I do wish there was some speed, but we'll cross that bridge. But yeah, no, it's an interesting team, and I think that once you saw that roster, as you said, it gave more context for what we were going to see in Portland with Rafael and Koss down there because there were clear like everyday roles for them there.
Well, let's go ahead and talk about. Do you have anything else that you want to talk about from Worcester now? Okay, so I guess with Portland, it's an interesting roster. It's not. It's a much more interesting roster than I thought we were going to get in Portland coming into the year, for a number of reasons. One, on the offense, we'll start on the offensive side again. You mentioned Rafaela and Koss are there. We did know that Nico Cavadas, Nick York, Matthew Lugo were guys that were interesting. They were going to be there on the offensive side. Stephen Scott as well. Philip Sykes, a guy who caught our eye in camp a fair amount, had a big jump in our season opening rankings, is there. Pitching side, the pitcher who probably had the most helium coming out of camp, Shane Drohan, is going to be the head of that rotation. He was already a guy that was interesting to us, but I think he's a lot more interesting now after a velocity jump, after adding a cutter. So he's
I think he finally did what we kind of have been waiting for. Like when he was drafted, he was athletic. He was still like, I think, a little skinnier. And this year it finally jumped. Like he went from, we tweeted about it, but last year's fastball averaged 90.8 miles an hour for the year. In spring training, he was 91 and 94. So he's sitting above what his average was last season. So we're talking like multiple miles an hour of gain on the average. So like that's very significant for someone like him, especially where his fastball was his weakest pitch last year. His changeup and his curveball were both better, I think, graded out better than his fastball. If you're not talking about like, in scouts who saw him, we're speaking very well of him for spring training, but we're potentially talking about a guy who could have like 4 average to better pitches with the changeup probably being plus. That's a whole lot of it. That's a very different story than a guy who's like has to pitch backwards because his secondary pitch is their best too. So yeah, he's super interesting, and definitely looking forward to getting a look at him when the Portland season gets going. Because yeah, as you said, after him, I think the rotation and the pitching staff as a whole, frankly, is a little light. Like I really like Luis Guerrero, as we've talked about a lot on here. Kind of running joke.
Well, that was the big surprise, right? I mean, I think of all, not surprise because we talked about it on the last episode.
But during camp, it seemed like it kind of had
surprise
a chance.
From what we might have thought going into camp.
Yeah.
I think when we came out, we thought there was a possibility.
With the way they were using him in major league games, it just seemed pretty 100%. Like they really like this guy. And yeah, I'm excited to see what he can do there. I think he's the best pure relief prospect in the system. And so it's going to be interesting to see how stuff, this is a big test for him. He's going to get upper level bats. Obviously, he saw a ton of action in major league spring training, which was good experience. And he got hit around a little bit. But, that's the thing is, now he's going to learn that you just can't blow guys away. You can't outstuff guys in the high minors. You're going to be facing better pitching, and you're going to have to actually, command your pitches, locate, sequence correctly, like throw your secondary pitches for a strike to get ahead, things like that. So I think it'll be a really good test for him. And him, another guy, Theo Denlinger, Ryan Zefferjon, guys like that. I'm all looking forward to the bullpen. And then there's some like repeat guys and guys that we've seen before. So yeah, overall, I think the pitching staff, it's pretty good. But I think it's the lineup is where the real interest comes in.
For sure. For sure. Going down to Greenville, we knew that was going to be a great lineup. It's headlined by Marcelo Meyer, but you've also got Edinson Paulino there. You've got Blaze Jordan, Nathan Hickey, a kind of interesting outfield of guys like Gilberto Jimenez and Eduardo Lopez. Jimenez not making Portland, I think maybe the kind of negative surprise. Not that it was out of the question. Not that it's not that surprising, but it just seemed like it was one of those things where it's like, does he just get pushed up because of inertia? Right. But he will be in Greenville.
He would have gotten crushed by AA pitching, though.
I don't disagree. But at some point, you just wonder if a guy needs to kind of get some failure. But I mean, he didn't really succeed in Greenville last year either.
He hit like 260 last year. Yeah. It wasn't like the previous season where he like had a good year while not really having a good year in Salem. Yes. Last season, I mean, he was 268, 306, 366. Like that's not going to cut it.
Right. Also, we should mention Brian Bonasi is starting the year on the IL. He had visa issues, got to camp late. I don't know why he's on IL versus like just being an extended, but he's on the IL. So he just needs to catch back up. So interesting
procedural thing. Yeah.
Yes. Interesting lineup. And then the pitching staff is interesting in that it could be a lot more interesting in like 3 months. Wickelman
I don't know. I think it's pretty interesting right now.
It is now too. I'm not saying it's not. But, the rotation's got Wickelman, Gonzalez, plus a couple of interesting.
I like Bastardo are marginally interesting each.
Yeah. But the bullpen is almost not more interesting. Bullpen's than the rotation,
good. I mean,
it's a
Chris
good bullpen.
Troy and Alex Hoppe. Alex Hoppe, I think, would be another kind of roster surprise. He seemed to pitch his way to Greenville.
Well, it was interesting that Alex Hoppe, Isaac Coffey, and Jarrett Godman were all 2022 draftee.
Yeah,
college guys who pitched their way straight to Greenville and
I kind of like it though with pure relief guys. Like if you're a pure relief guy who's 23, why not? Like see what they can do in Greenville and then you adjust from there. Godman's an interesting guy because he throws from like a really low arm slot and there's some good movement on his pitches. Hoppe, I think we talked about, has like big fastball. Mm-hmm. Secondary stuff is kind of a work in progress, but his fastball, like really good shape, good analytics, and obviously it's like 99, 97, 98, 99 miles an hour.
Yeah.
So that'll play. And Troy, again, is another guy we talked about last week who was pretty impressive. So I think it's like, it's not, the bullpen doesn't have big names, but I do think that, a couple of these guys are going to pop and potentially force their way to Portland pretty quickly. I could definitely see that.
Definitely. I could see it too.
And then I think we should mention the guys who aren't there. Yeah.
Yeah. So the IL, I mean, guys who long-term Tommy John rehab guys like Bradley Blaylock and Jeremy Wu Yelland are on this roster. They could easily wind up there,
I think Blaylock could be there by May. Yeah. Because I mean, he faced hitters for the second time since returning when I was down in spring training. Mm-hmm. So you figure he probably needs 5 or 6, 7. I don't know how many. It honestly depends how his arm reacts, but
they probably bring guys back slowly.
I thought he looked pretty good in even in that outing, given how soon after or to his return to the mound it was. So he's one I'll be keeping my eye on when he gets back.
Mm-hmm. And Wu Yelland is throwing too, so those are guys who could be back soon. Tyler Uberstein also starts on the IL, and Hunter Dobbins starts on the dev list. Those are guys who are also kind of worth checking out once they get ramped up in that Greenville pitching staff. Moving down to Salem, which I think is probably, I don't know how I would put it. I think there's the most, which it always is, because these guys, like we said, they haven't had a chance to fail yet either. But the most kind of number of guys I find interesting, perhaps. The lineup, it's interesting. Mikey Romero is the second best prospect there. He is starting the year on the IL as he comes back from some back stiffness. He's a week or two behind, maybe. Miguel Blaze is there with a strong outfield of Blaze, Alan Castro, Roman Anthony, and Juan Chacon in no particular order. Those are guys that are going to rotate the outfield spots. The interesting, also strong, when you've got Luis Ravello, Cutter Coffee, and Abram Liendo as the kind of second, third short type guys. Even then, when Romero comes back, that's going to be interesting to see how they split that playing time. Lionel James, an interesting guy on the infield corners. Catcher Daniel McElveny is a guy I really like, who I'll be keeping an eye on, a potential sleeper type this year. For me, that pitching staff, though, I love that potential rotation of Luis Perales, Elmer Rodriguez Cruz, Jetixon Paez, Dalton Rogers, Noah Dean. That's a solid 1-5 rotation, I think, as you've got right now on opening
Yeah,
day.
it's 5 of the top 40 or so prospects in the system. I think the most interesting thing to me is you just have so many different looks. Like you have Perales, who's just like the elite stuff. He's going to get up to 98, 99 miles an hour with 2+ secondaries potentially. Then you have Elmer Rodriguez Cruz, who pitches like a 30-year-old, even though he's 20, he's like 18 or 19. He's like 90 to 91, but he can spin 2 breaking balls on a chain and has good feel for a changeup. And you can really command everything. Like he will throw any pitch at any count. So he's kind of like a throwback arm. And then you have Paez, who also has a really good breaking ball and who's like velo's a little light. And then, but on the flip side, then you go to the lefties, and Dalton Rogers and Noah Dean can both run it up to the mid 90s. Dean maybe even higher. I think he was up to 96 when I saw him. So, and they have some interesting fastball shape there too. So yeah, it's a really interesting starting pitching staff. And I think just even as you said, the lineup as a whole too, like I like Lionel James a lot. He's pretty interesting in the sense of compared to from what I saw in camp. I do think there's some feel for hit there. Coffee, obviously, I think he looked pretty good when I was down there. He's definitely strong. He's physical. He's got some juice in his bat. It's going to be interesting to see how they kind of break up the shortstop, third base, second base reps with all those guys. I have a feeling that he'll probably get the majority of the shortstop reps until Romero comes back. But yeah, no, it's an interesting. And then obviously the outfield too, like I like Alan Castro a lot. He's someone we'll probably touch on when we talk about rankings. Miguel Blaze, Roman Anthony, like that's a really good outfield. Like, this lineup, it's going to be, 8 or 9 deep every night. So it's going to be a fun team. And then even in the bullpen, you got some interesting guys there too. Like Nathan Landry is someone I thought was pretty good during spring training. Johnny Felix is a converted position player, but he's got a pretty strong arm. Brock Bell's coming back from TJ. Stuff isn't back yet, but it's good to see him just on a roster after he's obviously had, I think he had 2 Tommy Johns actually.
Well, the second one, it's like a reconstruct. It's like called something different than TJ, but it's what it's
two
called.
arm surgeries.
The second
How
one,
about that?
yeah.
Marquise
Johnson
it's
basically TJ. Yeah.
Can run it up into the mid 90s. Like there's some interesting bullpen arms there too. So it's gonna be a fun team to follow for sure.
And let me mention actually the other catcher who I think was going to split most of the reps with McElveny is Roberto Mexicano, who saw a lot of time last year in Salem. Actually, it wouldn't surprise me if Mexicano went up mid-year, especially if a guy like Brooks Brannon is ready for a call up at some point in like July. After he starts the year in the FCL potentially, he's also worth keeping an eye on. So, and then I guess as far as the potential FCL roster, one note, Freddie Valdez, who you all remember is one of the outfielders the Red Sox got in the Andrew Benintendi trade, is being converted to pitching. Didn't happen with the bat, so he's moving to the mound. So, certainly of note, especially given how the Red Sox acquired him. The rest of the roster you can see
he's got a good arm and he's big.
He
I mean, so why not give it a chance?
Give it a shot. I will mention, we have the rest of the guys who are in Fort Myers on the FCL Red Sox roster. It is not out of the question that some of these guys do eventually just go to Salem, right? So I could easily see, like, say mid-year Blaze and or Castro and or Roman Anthony and or Juan Chacon, frankly, any of them, right? Let's say any of them get called up. I can see Yostinks and Garcia going up to Salem from extended or something, right?
Yeah, I could see like John Frank Salazar and Dusha Lear, like one of those catchers.
Yeah, Salazar especially because Salazar and actually instead of Brooks Brannon, I think Salazar is the guy who might be more likely to go up because he was in Salem last year. Salazar is converting to catching.
That's why he's back there, I think.
Yes, the team is really happy with how he's taken to catching. Someone I spoke to during camp said he's a natural back there, but I think they just want him working on his craft down there rather than in games where in a game in Salem with fans where
it's a game with stakes versus like because they're playing games and extended, but it's like it's the same
different
stakes. Training. Yeah, they can roll innings, they can do whatever they want.
Yeah, exactly. So a little less pressure in that environment before they throw them in game action game action as opposed to, like you said, game stakes. That's the way to put it. So yeah, you can check out the rosters on the website. If you have any questions, hit us up, podcast@soxprospects.com. And we will answer any questions you have regarding the rosters or anything else. All right. And of course, as always, we want to answer your emails. If you want to send an email to the podcast, you can do so at podcast@soxprospects.com. We want to talk about what you all want to hear about. And Ian, this week's emails start off with our good friend John Berman over at CNN, who sends us an email saying the following. He says, "Greetings, gentlemen. We all love WAR as a stat, wins above replacement. Although I like the old-fashioned VORP more because it's more fun to say and easier to apply to life, but let's leave that aside." He says, "But can WAR really accurately measure what happened in Game 2 of the season with Ryan McKenna?" For those of you who don't remember, McKenna dropped what would have been the final out of the game in left field, giving the Red Sox an opening to then win it on a walk-off home run by Adam Duvall. He says the O's literally lost a whole game because of one single play from McKenna. Conceptually, isn't that single play worth a whole -1 WAR for him? Great question, John. A few thoughts on this, Ian. First of all, consider, yes, that one play you could consider it as worth -1 WAR, but if the Orioles were up by like 10 runs, that one play would not have been the one loss, right? So it's that one play, yes, given the timing of it, looks huge and what contributed to the loss, but like you could also say like a given strikeout in the game being a strikeout instead of a 2-run home run in light of things could be worth as much, right? So it's WAR is measuring the amount that a player contributes or doesn't contribute to a win. I think the statistic you're thinking of conceptually is called win percentage added. And that is how much, I mean, I guess it's similar concept to what I was just saying, but it's how much a given play adds or subtracts from his team's chances to win the game. So in that game, for example, McKenna had a -0.04 win percentage added. So he had a 0.04 win percentage removed, I guess is how you would say it. Compare with, say, Adam Duvall's for the game was 1.25 because he had the walk-off, which if you look at the kind of win percentage chance chart on Fangraphs, it just, immediately spikes with the Duvall home run because the Red Sox were losing in the 9th inning. Hits a home run, and now they are winning. So if you look at a given play, for example, the error in left by McKenna, which column is the win percentage? The second one. Okay. That play added 0.05 percentage chance that the Red Sox would win. The Red Sox went from having a 4.9% chance of winning to a 10.2% chance of winning. So that's the concept, I think. I've kind of went long on that. Anything to add, Ian, on this point? No. Okay. Cool. And of course, as always, thank you for the question, John, and thanks for listening and for all your support as well. Our next email comes to us from Zachary, who says, "Hi, what do you think about the potential unintended consequences of the new shift rule? In particular, could it lead to further adoption of a 3 true outcome approach for power hitting lefties because of the lack of a shift that mitigates the cost of such an approach? Furthermore, how do you think this could affect the organization's approach to player development?" Interesting, because in our next episode, we ask Brian Abraham about how they're changing their approach to player development based on new rules, in particular the shift, but mostly on a defensive side of things, not really on an offensive side of things. I'm sure on the offensive side of things, they would say they're not changing anything. But as far as the 3 true outcome approach, I don't necessarily see the shift as pull tendencies as being a result of a 3 true outcome approach necessarily.
No.
Yeah.
Go ahead. No, you go.
Because I think, if anything, now you're going to have more balls falling in on those sort of things. So you're going to see more balls in play.
Yeah, the BABIP was higher this season. That was one of the big.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, no, I think if anything, it encourages like using all fields, and it rewards people for hitting the ball hard, which doesn't necessarily have to be over the fence. So, yeah, I don't think that has been the case. I do think one unintended consequence. Well, I guess it was intended, but I don't think it's working out the way it meant to. Is the stolen bases, and I do think that's something that we should talk about.
Rule.
Oh no! the rule changes in general.
Rule changes. Yeah, he asked in particular about the shift rule.
I know, but
the stolen bases are way up.
I want to talk about the stolen bases because I think that I didn't even think about this. The pitch clock actually has a massive plays a massive role in stolen bases because it's not just the 3, disengagements.
You can time when the pitch is coming.
You can time it because, and this is something the Red Sox pitchers really need to work on. Is
terrible so far.
If you release it with 2 seconds left, they can time it up on every single play. And we saw the Orioles run wild against them, and even the Pirates are stealing like their backup catcher.
Aren't teams 12 for 12 or something?
Yeah, it's like
against the Red Sox.
Yeah, and not all of those are not actually. Most of them are not on the catcher. Like with the Red Sox relievers are pretty slow to the plate, and when they're allowing the guys to time them up like they were, you got to throw some wrinkles in there. So I think that's something that teams are going to have to adjust to, is like finding a way to control the running game, because teams are running wild right now, and it's just very interesting to see.
And stolen bases are up, and I think stolen base percentage is up around like 83% or something, which you're going to see even more teams running now. That percentage is probably going to come down because teams are going to try it more, because the break-even point for making a stolen base worth it is somewhere around 75%.
Right, and that's why I wish the Red Sox had a little more speed, was because I don't.
It'd be nice to take advantage.
Take advantage of it as much as they could.
I mean, the problem though is that Jarren Duran's not a great base stealer. He's not as instinctual as say a Hamilton.
You don't necessarily have to be with the new rules, frankly.
I guess that's true. I want to see him trying to run more.
It takes a lot out of it because the disengagements are limited. With the pitch clock, you can literally time it up. Like if a guy doesn't release it by a certain, or start his delivery by a certain point, he has to come to the plate by then. So
Yep. Yeah. And also I should mention this is Zach B, son of John B, as he notes in the subject line of this email. I love it. It sounds like it's something from Game of Thrones. Like I am Zach B, son of John B, first of my name, or something. Or I guess he's not the first because he's son of John B. But thanks for the email, Zach. Our next email comes to us from New Royal Rooters. And it says, what do you guys think of the Red Sox catching development? It seems like there's a disconnect between the types of prospects they develop and the types of players they are willing to let catch in the big leagues. In the big leagues, they only trust defensive first shortstops. Vasquez came up that way, but became a decent hitter. But dating back to Swihart, they seem to only develop hit first catching prospects. I don't mind going defense first, but since that's where the game is. But then why are their prospects mostly hitters like Hickey, Scott, and Brannon? If Hickey lives up to his hitting skills but doesn't take some massive step forward behind the plate, I don't see them actually letting him catch. Thanks. It's an interesting question, Ian, because I don't think it's quite right. I see why it would look that way, because even I would throw Daniel McAvenny as a converted infielder, John Frank Salazar as a converted infielder.
Mm-hmm.
I think, to me, and tell me if you agree with this, the defense-only catchers they have, I can think of one off the top of my head, are guys who don't hit and therefore are just not as good of prospects as the guys who can hit.
Yes.
And I'm sure there's one that's top of mind for you.
Endirso Lira, was that who you were thinking of?
No, I was thinking of Eli Marrero.
Oh, yeah.
A guy who they drafted and who is in Portland for them right now, it wasn't a super, I think he was a day 2 pick, right?
No, he was an 8th. I thought he was an 8th round pick or something.
That's
he was an 8th round pick.
That's
day two. Yeah.
Of the
sorry.
draft. Yeah.
When I think of day 2, I'm thinking 11th to 20th rounds.
That's day 3. Right. Yeah. Marrero was a day 2 pick. Yeah. And he's a terrific defensive catcher. That's why they brought him to Major League camp.
Yeah.
He just cannot hit.
Well, but I think Connor Wong can catch, and I think he can hit a little bit. I guess he wasn't drafted by them per se.
True. True.
But I think though the big thing is that the expectations for catcher need to be reined in, because catcher around the league is so bad. It's very rare. There are only a handful of teams that have true two-way threats at catcher. Mm-hmm. The majority of teams are running out what the Red Sox are. A Reese McGuire, Connor Wong platoon. The Giants is Roberto Perez and Blake Sabel, who's not even. He's an outfielder too. There's a bunch of the Rays is Mejia and Zanino or whoever. I don't think it's Zanino anymore, but there's just not a lot of good catchers. So I think that it's not that unreasonable that the Red Sox don't have anyone that highly regarded catcher. But I think that they've done a good job with these converts to the point where Scott, Hickey, like, I guess Hickey's not really a convert, but Scott, McIlvaney, like, they're both interesting. They're both in our top 60. I think Hickey is someone who could have a really big year. I like him a lot at the plate. The defense it's not terrible. It's okay. And yeah, if he can hit, like, you can figure out the defense. So
right.
Yeah, I think it's actually not in as bad. And there's also a few guys at the really like Lira, John Fran Garcia, who we'll probably get into more on the next episode or in a couple episodes from now when we talk about rankings. Like, guys like that are and Brooks Brandon are pretty far away, but they're interesting too. So yeah, I actually think it's in pretty decent shape.
And I think too, keep in mind when a guy gets to the major leagues, just because he's not a good major league hitter doesn't mean he didn't hit in the minors. Like McGuire didn't hit in the minors. He just was a defensive first catcher. But like a lot of guys get to the majors, they hit in the minors and they just don't hit as well in the majors. And it's like, oh, he's a defense first guy. And it's like, it wasn't necessarily always that way. Keep in mind in the other direction too, guys who hit, who do catch sometimes get moved off of catcher. So, like, I don't think anyone's like, why did the Nationals draft Harper as a catcher? Like, like that wasn't necessarily anything about their catching philosophy. It was just, he was a guy who caught, who could hit. And then they were like, you know what, we're just going to move him to the outfield.
Yeah, I think Will Myers was also drafted as a catcher.
Correct. That was the other one who I was thinking of. Kenley Jansen too, but no, there's one other guy who I was trying to think of. I mean, like Craig Biggio was a catcher when he actually caught in the major leagues for a minute.
Well, and I think the other one to mention is that the guy who had the potential to be their best catcher, he's tragically passed away in Daniel Flores. And that was obviously, he was someone they gave over $3 million to, and was that 2017?
Yeah.
So like,
yeah, I don't think it's a focus. Right.
That's something completely out of their control. That was, the most they'd invested in a catcher in years, and that happened, which there's just nothing you can, you can't foresee that happening.
And they also used like a 3rd round pick on Austin Rye, who was a defense first catcher, right? I think it's just, there's a totality of circumstances to evaluating a player. And sometimes they just wind up with a string of guys in the system who are hit first catchers, but they'll supplement them with good defensive guys to make sure that rosters have those guys too.
Yeah.
So our final question comes from Andy, who says, hi, Chris and Ian. At times you will reference an estimate of how far under the CBT the Red Sox are. COTS shows them as being 17.9 million under the CBT. Is that the best resource to use, or can you recommend another one? Thank you, Andy. The problem with this is I think no one really knows. So I usually go to COTS first for like contract type things. We also have, I guess on our site, on our 40-man roster page, we don't keep CBT. We just have like payroll, like what a guy's making.
Yeah, I like the Red Sox payroll guy on Twitter.
Yeah.
I think he does a
I was going to mention him.
I don't know. They do a good job.
I guess it could be
he
or she.
That's
True.
what I said.
We don't know. Good point.
They do a good job of factoring in things like the bonuses, and like that's what COTS is missing, is like it doesn't take into account those like roster bonuses and all like that, those other things.
Sometimes it does.
Because like he only has the Red Sox a couple million under compared to, you said COTS was 17.
I don't even know if that's right.
Not he, but I'm looking at their spreadsheet right now, and they have the Red Sox at 227 right now. When the CBT is 233.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, I don't know where he got that from.
Well, it's all on the spreadsheet, so you can look at it if you want it. But
right. But and then people use Spotrac. I don't think it's more or less accurate than COTS is. I've seen a lot of people cite Spotrac, and it's just wrong.
So I don't know.
They have
I
think too. It's tough.
I personally use the Red Sox payrolls the majority of the time. I'm checking stuff out.
Yep. Cool. And that's all of our emails. So again, podcast@soxprospects.com. Hit us up because we want to talk about what you all want to hear about. And with that, we will wrap up. So thank you all for listening. We appreciate your support and your download/listen. As always, if you want to support us, you can do so on patreon.com/soxprospects. And as always, we want to shout out our $5 level Patreon supporters for the episode. This episode, that group includes Tyler Woodrow, Patton, New Hampshire, Jeff Trainer, David R. Nardone, Tim Harding, Bill Stanton, Evan Kirkwood, James O'Hara, Nathan Kenyon, and David B. If that's a little out of order, it's because we recorded this episode and the next episode out of order, so I said them awkwardly. If you were expecting to hear your name, you might be the next one. Anyway, thank you all for your support. You can follow us on Twitter. Follow Ian at Ian Cundall. That's IANCUNDALL. And follow me at SP Chris Hatfield. You can follow the website at Sox Prospects, both on Twitter and Instagram. And as we mentioned, the email is podcast@soxprospects.com. Hit us up. Ask us your questions. Give us your thoughts. and we might read them on the show. That's about it for this episode. We'll be back in your eardrums early next week with our interview with Brian Abraham. We hope you all are going to like it. We think it's a really good interview. We just want to give this one a little room to breathe. It was a little more time sensitive, so we'll get to Brian next week. And then after that, we'll have an episode talking about our season opening rankings, which we didn't even get to on this episode. So there's so much going on. It's an exciting time of year. We hope you all enjoy it. We hope you all will be following us all year long on the podcast, on Twitter, at the website, at soxprospects.com. Of course, follow us there. Join our forum. It's a great place to talk about the minor leagues, the major leagues, all kinds of things. Great community there. A lot better than the Bird app, which, no poop emojis in the forum. So anyway, thank you all for listening. We'll be back in your eardrums very, very, very soon. Thanks again. Happy opening day in the minor leagues.